Welcome to the Wisdom Lifestyle Money Show. I'm your host, Scott Dillingham. Today I have a local realtor, Hassan, who's with us today. How's it going, Hassan?
Good. How are you?
Awesome. So welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you. This has been in the works for a while now.
It
Ever
has.
since we first met, we always talked about the podcast and coming on. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
And here we are. I'm glad to have you. So one of the things that we do whenever we start these off is we always like to hear about your childhood, right? Because now you're a successful realtor and we like to hear how you became one. So dive in. How did this all start for you?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a long story, but it all started with my older brother. So he was born prematurely. So he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy.
Okay.
So he had trouble, early on. He was in and out of the hospital doing a lot of surgeries and whatnot. And essentially in Lebanon, they told my parents that they had to make a choice. He could either stay in Lebanon and never walk again, or he could try to move to the States or Canada and get better health care and have better chances.
Okay.
So my dad and my older brother decided, to go to the States. So they left. When my dad left, my younger brother, who you met,
Yeah.
was only 20 days old. So it was just my mom and I with my younger brother, Hussein.
Wow.
And we were in Lebanon without my dad and my brother, without seeing them for 7 years. He had started the immigration process,
Okay.
and it was taking quite a while. But then in 2006, Israel invaded Lebanon. And so we basically went through the war and whatnot. And during the war, my dad basically called immigration, and they got the paperwork for refugee
Okay.
going. So it was an interesting experience, being in war while at the same time trying to get to the Canadian embassy and providing them with paperwork and everything. But ultimately, we came to Canada, and I my mom has always been big on education and just doing good in school. So I've always been a smart kid. Went through schooling and then decided to go to the college for robotics engineering. Did that, and then I got a job for 5 years as a robotics engineer.
That's
And
cool.
right after COVID, there was the microchip shortage,
Yep.
which led to a lot of layoffs. So I was getting laid off a lot. I think the biggest layoff was about 3 months
Okay.
without a job. And you can imagine after also COVID, we had just had Kassam, our first baby at that time as well. So I think at one point, we were literally like in the negatives in our bank account. We had used up all our savings. We had to, what do you call it when you stop the mortgage again?
Yeah, like you deferred your
Yeah,
payments.
deferred our payments
Yeah.
for our mortgage. So we were really struggling, and at the time, that's when Cassandra decided to do her real estate license, and she had started working, and we were starting to build kind of our life back up.
Okay.
And then while I was laid off, I was just like, I have one of two choices. I could sit here and wait around, or I could do something and change careers and do something a little bit different with my life. I was at a point where I was like, you know what? I'm a bit of a different person. At first, I was more introverted. I enjoyed working with robots because it didn't require any human
Yeah.
interaction. But eventually, you change as a person, and so I wanted to be able to be surrounded by people and help people out a little bit more. So I made the switch, and here we are today.
Question for you, because you mentioned your father and your older brother went to the States,
Yeah.
and then you guys live in Canada. How did that conversion from the States to Canada happen?
Yeah, so when they went to the States, they were there for about 2 years.
Okay.
And somebody had met my dad and was like, "What are you doing, man? Like, go to Canada. They have free healthcare over there." And
Nice.
you're in the States, you're in and out of hospitals and doing surgeries and appointments. It can be difficult financially, right? So someone told him, you're right across the border because they came to Michigan. So
Okay.
they were right across the border. So they told him, go to Canada, better healthcare, free healthcare. So
That's awesome.
that's how they came here. And then they were here for about 5 years before we came.
Now, you mentioned going from robotics to realtor. Do you ever miss the robotics side? I mean, that's what you went to school for.
So Hussein actually followed in my footsteps and he does robotics. So every now and then he's telling me stories about work and the issues that he's having over there. And so sometimes I do miss it. I think what I miss the most is the problem solving aspect.
Okay.
Just the feeling you get when something stops and you're like, why did it stop? And
Yeah.
then you go down, the roadmap of, let me figure it out and troubleshoot. And then once you just hit reset and then everything is working again, it's a really satisfying feeling to see, everything start up. And
And just for fun, is it mostly hardware where the issues fail, or do you find it in the software?
it was a combination, right? So there was a lot of hardware. Obviously, there's a lot of wear and tear.
Yeah.
So when things, wear out, you run into some issues. But a lot of it too was also about efficiency, right? And so you could always go into the software and into the code and find ways to improve, especially when you're working in a manufacturing environment.
Yeah.
Cycle times is huge, right? So one of the things I always tried to do was optimize that.
Yep.
And I find that a lot of the skills that I had as a robotics engineer actually are very transferable to real estate, like the problem solving, right? You have a problem in front of you and you have to be creative and find a unique way to solve it.
Yeah.
And it's very satisfying when you find that solution for your clients and,
Yeah.
you're able to bring them the good news and close on a property or find a way to get them the terms that they want.
That's awesome. Was there any other skills? Like, I love that you said that. Was there any other skills that you were able to take with you into this?
Yeah, so obviously as an engineer, you have to be very analytical,
Yep.
and you have to be very good with numbers and understand, the numbers always tell a story.
Yep.
And so in real estate, that's essentially what it is too, right? You never have a crystal ball. You can never tell what's going on in the future, but you can project and you can take a pretty good guess by looking at the numbers and looking at all the factors that affect it. And that way you're able to give your clients a little bit of, heads up and give
Yeah.
them the right guidance as to what's going on and what's best for them depending on what their needs are. So,
No, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah.
So just speaking about the numbers, I know there's a lot of talk going on right now about what the market's doing. Did we hit rock bottom? Is it a good time to buy now? What are all your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, so with the interest rates going up, we saw a dip in the market, right? A lot of people were on the fence. They weren't sure what they wanted to do. They weren't sure if the interest rates were going to continue to climb, if they were going to go down. And so because there wasn't as much activity in the market, we saw the market slow down. Prices went down. The average price was down. The activity, inventory, everything was kind of down, right? And people started freaking out a little bit, but it was also around the holiday season, right? And it was in the winter, which is naturally a slow time in the market. And spring is naturally one of the hottest, in the market. So recently, there's been a pickup in the market, especially with interest rates. Last meeting they decided that they were not going to bring up the interest rates anymore.
Correct. Yeah.
So people have a more clear idea of what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so there has been a lot of movement recently, especially in certain areas where the inventory is not, hasn't increased as much as maybe other areas. We are finding that there are, 10 to 20 multiple offers and things like that. So the market has definitely picked up a little bit.
Even the average sales price I was seeing has started
Yeah.
to come up too compared to where it was.
Yeah, the average price has picked up naturally with multiple offers again and competing. The prices will go up, but they haven't gone up to the heights that they were last year,
Yeah.
around February and March. So
Which is good. So that's why
Yeah.
I think people should buy now. And I think you're under the same impression.
yeah, exactly. And there's a saying that I keep hearing everywhere, and that's marry the property and date the rate, right?
There you go. It's
So
true.
the rates will always, fluctuate, and you can always refinance once the rate comes down. But if you're able to capitalize on the lower purchase prices now, then I think it's best case scenario.
And another cool thing too is, so the Bank of Canada, like you said, they announced that they were keeping the rates the same. But what's happened is the fixed rates, they weren't ever tied to what the Bank of Canada was doing. That was
Yes,
just
exactly.
a variable.
Yeah.
But the fixed rates have actually been coming down. So like this morning, We actually, well, it changed this morning. So we had a 4.59 was the lowest, and it just changed to 4.48. So literally today, one of the lenders came out with a lower rate because the bond prices are coming down.
Yeah.
And that's obviously global demand and, turmoil with all the stuff with Ukraine and Russia, and then the banks, the SVB right issue, and things like that. So it's bringing down the bond rates. So again, for home buyers, their rates are becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So
Yeah,
it's good.
and me and you have always had conversations, and so you were always telling me that, and I was relaying that information to some of my buyers as well. Because the news isn't always very specific, and so a lot of people only want to read the headlines, and they don't read the rest of the article or whatever it may be. So you see interest rates are rising, and you assume that it's all the interest rates, but you very early on you mentioned that the fixed rates haven't been affected. It's actually the variable rate.
Yeah, that's right. So it's interesting, but I think people are starting to see that now, which is great because even on our end, right, we're having a lot more people doing the pre-approvals. They want to lock in their rate for spring, and the good news is even if they do it now, if the rates still continue to lower, they can get the lower rate because the lenders will honor that new lower rate. So you're not stuck, but if there was to be an increase, then they're protected. So it's really cool. Now I know you kind of like niche yourself out, and you have sort of a focused customer base that you excel at working with. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so just based on my personality and the way that I was raised and just my demeanor in general, I enjoy education. I think a lot of my role models have been teachers. And so one of the things I really enjoy is teaching and guiding, my client base. And so naturally, I do really well with first-time home buyers. I was a first-time home buyer. I think we all were at one point. And we understand that it's a very daunting process and it's very stressful. And so you need that person alongside you that specializes, and has the patience,
Yep.
is able to communicate and kind of show you the ropes and guide you through the roadmap of home ownership,
Yep.
but also have access to, government incentives, right, and programs that are made to help first-time home buyers.
Yep.
Especially a lot of first-time home buyers ask, can I afford a house?
Yeah.
Right?
Good
And
question.
it can be very important to meet with your realtor, even if you don't think you can afford it, because we might have, programs, we might have incentives, things that are going on that can help you. Or at the very least, you can prepare for the future
Yeah.
and have a very specific plan as to how to put yourself in a position to be able to buy a house, how to save for the down payment, how much money can you expect to be paying, and things like that. So I enjoy the process. It's one of my favorite things to sit with a first-time home buyer,
That's awesome.
and just kind of nurture them. And finally, when they finally find that dream home and they get it, it's a special moment for sure. And I
Yeah,
enjoy
it's
that.
definitely rewarding. And I like that you said, like, and you elaborated first time homebuyers because a lot of people don't understand, right? And they'll call the listing agent and maybe try to use them, or maybe they get a referral from a family member that says, we recommend this realtor. But being in the industry, I know lots of realtors, and some of them don't like to work with first time home buyers, right? Because they know that they need more of that education piece. They maybe like to work with, existing homeowners, or maybe they like to work with investors, right? So the fact that that's your niche, that's really cool. So if anybody's listening and you are a first time home buyer, Haas will be able to help you, right? More so than a realtor who doesn't like working with first-time home buyers. And I know it's funny because people think realtor and they'll work with every client, but that's not the case.
No, for sure. And I'm actually in the process of writing a book for buyers
Okay.
to give them kind of just an encompassing, book to be able to read and be able to educate themselves and prepare. I have a seller book as well that I just recently finished.
Okay.
That I have on my website if for free for people to be able to read it and get some education from that as well.
Nice.
It's really nice to be a go-to resource for people and to be able to teach. It's one of my favorite things. And so, like I said, I do really well with first-time home buyers. I do really well with families that are, upsizing or downsizing and going through the process. I guess I do well with anybody that really that is feeling overwhelmed and just needs somebody that's very calming, very soothing, very patient, compassionate, that's able to kind of go at their pace and not be too pushy.
Yep.
And so I think that's kind of the group that I do really well with. So if you're someone that feels like that, feel free to
Give
reach
us
out
a call.
anytime.
No, that's perfect. So what we'll do, just so the listener doesn't have to take out a pen or paper, and the notes of this recording or the description, wherever, we'll put a link to your website for them to get the free book. Now, on your website, because I know you have social media stuff, right? I know you mentioned before we started Facebook and Instagram, and there could be others too. On your website, will it list all of those? So if somebody wants to follow
Yeah,
you,
so it's kind of like a one-stop shop. They'll be able to read a little bit about me, find out a little bit about me as a person.
Nice.
They'll have access to kind of what I do in my process of how I service my buyers and sellers.
Okay.
I also have a way for them to book an appointment with me directly from the website. So if you were someone that's looking for a buyer consultation, you want to know, how this is where I am right now and these are my needs. How do I proceed from this point on? I'm more than happy to sit with you and just have that conversation. And then same with sellers, right? The market is constantly changing and people are asking questions. Do I sell now? Do I wait? For that too, if they wanted to, they can book an appointment with me straight from the website.
That's awesome.
My free seller book is on there as well. And as soon as I'm done my buyer book, that will be on the website.
Nice. That's awesome.
With links to all my socials. If somebody wants to follow my journey and follow my personal life as well,
Okay.
feel free.
That's incredible. So before we go, because we do have to wrap this up, is there any important piece of advice that you could give? And maybe it's not tied to real estate, just maybe a life lesson that you learned from your parents or whatever. Is there a lesson or something that you could share with the audience here that they could take away with them?
Honestly, it always comes back to knowledge is power.
Okay.
Having the knowledge of what to do and when to do it is huge. Like I wish I could go back in time and to certain areas of my life and certain points of my life and just be able to sit down with myself and give myself that knowledge, right?
That's awesome.
When I first bought my house, my parents are immigrants. They never owned before.
Yeah.
And I just kind of went through that whole process just completely blindfolded.
Yeah.
I didn't know, like I didn't even shop around for interest rates. I just went straight to my bank and I didn't even look at the interest rate, didn't know what it meant, didn't know that there were other possibilities. We just kind of went to the bank and we're like, hey, I want a mortgage, and didn't shop around, didn't talk to anybody else. So it's really important, like, and you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So knowledge is power. Do yourself a favor and do the research, sit down with somebody, get expert advice. There's never any obligation, right? You're not obligated to work with anyone if you don't feel that connection and if you don't feel good with them, but at least give them the chance to sit down and get that knowledge to set yourself up for the future.
Yep. And I like that you said the no obligation thing too, because a lot of people think like, oh, setting up a phone call, that means I have to use this person. You don't. And I agree with you. I think that you should interview the person that you want to work with. It's the biggest purchase you're ever going to make.
Yeah.
Right? You want to make sure
100%.
there's a connection between you two and it's not a transaction.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be enjoyable for either of us, right?
Yeah.
I never really force anybody to work with me. If we don't connect and if there's turmoil between us, then it's better for the both of us to find an alternative. But yeah.
Well, awesome. Thanks for coming on, Haas. We have to wrap this up, but hope everybody enjoyed the show, and check the description and all that for all of Haas's links there.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Thanks for coming.